Ethel Smyth has often been regarded as an English eccentric and was somewhat notorious for her colourful love affairs and suffragette activities. Her life encompassed prison for these and the proms for some of her music. One of the conductors of her works at the proms was Sir Thomas Beecham. He visited her in Holloway Prison in 1912 and described the much-quoted story of the inmates all marching and singing as Smyth beat time in almost Bacchic frenzy with a toothbrush. Her father, Major General John Hall Smyth, came from a military family and was a senior officer in the Royal Artillery. He returned to their home in Sidcup after the Indian Mutiny in 1857. Ethel, from a young age, was taught piano and music theory, as any well-brought-up Victorian girl would have been. However, after hearing a new governess who had studied in Leipzig play Beethoven, aged 12, Ethel decided she must be a composer. Her father objected strongly and made her give up all music study. For 2 years she battled, fasting and locking herself up in her room, and eventually her father gave in. Aged 19, she was allowed to go and study music in Leipzig. Leipzig was a major cultural centre at the time, and she met Brahms, Clara Schumann and Tchaikovsky. She also met Julius Klengel, the cellist to whom this cello sonata was dedicated. She wasn't happy at the Leipzig Conservatoire, and aged 20, Ethel became a private student of Heinrich von Herzogenberg. At the same time, she began an affair with his wife, Elisabeth von Stockhausen. Ethel went to Florence in 1882 with a letter of introduction to meet Elizabeth's sister Julia. She was married to Henry Brewster, a philosopher and writer. Ethel was initially attracted to Julia, but after a while Henry and Ethel became lovers. She later wrote that he was her only heterosexual partner. Henry became a lifelong friend. He was the librettist for some of her most important operas, including Der Wald. This had its New York premiere at the Metropolitan Opera House in 1903. In an interview for a New York paper, Ethel said, "I've always thought if I did anything worthwhile, I should like to see it presented in America. From what I've heard, I hold in regard American treatment and receptivity and shall await American judgment eagerly." Though not well received by the critics, Der Wald was a box office success and remains remarkably the only opera composed by a woman to be performed by the Met. In 1910, Smyth composed The March of the Women, which became the anthem of the suffragette movement. Ethel campaigned actively for women's votes and took part in the various English social changes happening at the time. In 1922, Smyth was made a Dame of the British Empire in recognition of the quality of her compositions. With her increasing deafness, she composed less and wrote more. She had books published as well as being a prolific diarist and letter writer. Her mother's grandfather had been the 4th Baronet, Sir Josias Strachey. With these family connections, her increased interest in writing and her belief in free relationships, Ethel became increasingly involved with the Bloomsbury Group. Virginia Woolf became a very close friend of Ethel and described meeting her as being descended upon like a wolf on the fold. Whether she was composing music, writing books, or falling in love, Smyth did it with unstoppable passion. Today she's mostly known through her colourful and powerful operas such as The Wreckers. One critic called this the most important operatic work by an English composer between Purcell and Britten. However, she was also an accomplished composer of chamber music, as her cello sonata shows. Sometimes likened to Brahms, Smyth's music has its own rich and meaty sound world with a wide range of emotion.